What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. And then you have consequential summary. Here you're compressing a sequence of causally related events that lead up to a significant event, which you would write in scene. She did this, and then this happened. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. What is scene? What is summary? And when do you use one or the other? Early on, when I submitted my first story to a workshop, the feedback I got from my teacher was that it was too told, meaning it was all summary rather than scene. Now, I thought I was writing in scene. I didn't even know the difference between scene and summary. I didn't know there was a difference. I didn't understand what a scene was or how to write one. It wasn't until I was in grad school that I started to understand the difference, when to write one versus the other, and how to write both effectively. So in this episode, I want to define for you the difference between scene and summary. We'll talk about the purpose of each and when to write in scene versus when to write in summary. Now, before we dive in, I want to talk about some common ways writers get scene and summary confused. Sometimes writers will write mostly in summary when they think they're writing in scene. For example, they'll summarize the plot or some other significant event rather than dramatize it through a series of scenes and chapters. Other times, when they do write in scene, it's not framed to highlight one significant moment or event. It usually strings several significant moments together, so every moment is rendered in scene indiscriminately. Every detail is zoomed into, and so we don't sense any urgency or unified purpose to the scene. So the scene isn't shaped around a significant moment. And rather than feel immersed in the scene, the reader is overwhelmed and confused. Now, we'll be getting more into how to frame a scene at another time, but for now, I want you to learn how to use both scene and summary strategically and effectively. When you have too much summary or summary that's just flat information, the reader is likely to get bored. That said, summary can be useful. You just need to know when to write in scene and when to write in summary. Each affects the other. Scenes are effective partly because they follow narrative summary. Summary can help frame the scene or give the context for a scene. And we can use summary as a rest or relief from the intensity of a scene. For example, in Tobias Wolff's story, Bullet in the Brain, we start off with a scene in a bank that grows more and more intense as bank robbers come in and ultimately shoot the main character in the head. And then in the seconds that the bullet enters his brain, we move into several paragraphs of summary as the man's life flashes before his eyes. So a rhythmic exchange from one to the other can enhance the reader's experience. So let's get into it. Whether you're writing a novel, a memoir, or short fiction, your story is about the movement of characters through time. A story is about the movement of characters through time. Scene and summary are both ways of treating narrative time. So let's define the difference. Summary covers a relatively long period of time in a relatively short space on the page. It may be a sentence or two. It may be a paragraph or two. But summary compresses a relatively long span of time. It may compress years, it may compress days or hours. Scene deals at length with a relatively brief span of time. It takes a relatively short span of time and shows it unfolding moment by moment. So it extends time, whereas summary compresses time. Here's an example of scene from Tobias Wolff's story, Bullet in the Brain. We start out in scene as Anders waits on the teller line of a bank at the end of the day before the bank closes. Here's an excerpt. With the line still doubled around the rope, one of the tellers stuck a position closed sign in her window and walked to the back of the bank, where she leaned against a desk and began to pass the time with a man shuffling papers. The women in front of Anders broke off their conversation and watched the teller with hatred. "Oh, that's nice," one of them said. She turned to Anders and added, confident of his accord, "One of those little human touches that keep us coming back." Okay, so a scene gives us the illusion of things unfolding in real time, and the character or characters are engaging in action. Now, that action may be dialogue. It may be your character's thought about what's happening as it's unfolding. It may be physical action. It may be all of those, but it gives the reader the illusion that it's happening in real time and it's unfolding in a specific place. In this case, the scene is unfolding inside the bank. Now, this scene begins to get more intense as bank robbers come in and ultimately shoot Anders in the head, and then it moves to a summary of his life. Anders did not remember his wife, whom he had also loved, before she exhausted him with her predictability, or his daughter, now a sullen professor of economics at Dartmouth. He did not remember standing just outside his daughter's door as she lectured her bear about his naughtiness and described the truly appalling punishments Paws would receive unless he changed his ways. So it goes on to summarize a lifetime of significant moments from his life, but this is all happening within seconds that the bullet is entering his brain. Okay, so when do you write in scene and when do you write in summary? A scene should be reserved for your story's key turning points or moments of confrontation or insights, big or small. So there are significant moments that you dramatize beat for beat so that the reader is immersed in the moment, experiencing it as your point of view character experiences it. Summary is used to convey information or provide exposition or to help us understand a character's motive in the present. Summary could also adjust the pace and transition us between scenes. Summary is useful for giving us essential backstory. It can give us a wider life around the characters to help us understand them in the present. This is how Tobias Wolff uses summary in Bullet in the Brain. It could also remind us of something that happened earlier in the story. It's really effective when it covers a long stretch of time that either leads to or follows something significant. For example, in those first few seconds that the bullet enters Anders' brain, his life flashes in front of him in summary. So you can use summary to cover backstory, to remind the reader of something that happened earlier in the story, or when you need to cover a long stretch of time in a small span. Now, there are two ways you can think of summary, and this is something I learned from Janet Burraway. There's circumstantial summary and sequential summary. Circumstantial summary and sequential summary. With circumstantial summary, you can convey how things were generally during an extended period in your character's life. So these are repeated actions. Every Wednesday on their way home from school after band practice, Laura and her sister would take a shortcut through the old baseball field behind their house. And then we'd move into scene as soon as something out of the ordinary happened to disrupt that routine. Then one day, a stranger approached them. So we'd move to a scene where there would be some confrontation or turning point or realization. That's circumstantial summary. And then you have consequential summary. Here you're compressing a sequence of causally related events that lead up to a significant event, which you would write in scene. She did this, and then this happened. Here's an example from Margaret Atwood's novel, The Blind Assassin. So she starts in summary. 10 days after the war ended, my sister Laura drove a car off a bridge. The bridge was being repaired. She went right through the danger sign. The car fell 100 feet into the ravine, smashing through the treetops feathery with new leaves, then burst into flames and rolled down into the shallow creek at the bottom. Chunks of the bridge fell on top of it. Nothing much was left of her but charred smithereens. So it's a summary of her sister's accident. It's following a sequential chain of events. We don't experience the accident with her sister. It's told in summary. It's already happened. But notice how concrete, specific details bring life into the summary. So we're still drawn into it. The second paragraph moves into another sequential summary. I was informed of the accident by a policeman. The car was mine, and they traced the license. His tone was respectful. No doubt he recognized Richard's name. He said the tires may have caught on a streetcar track or the brakes may have failed, but he also felt bound to inform me that 2 witnesses, a retired lawyer and a bank teller, dependable people, had claimed to have seen the whole thing. They'd said Laura had turned the car sharply and deliberately and had plunged off the bridge with no more fuss than stepping off a curb. They'd noticed her hands on the wheel because of the white gloves she'd been wearing. Okay, summary. We're getting a sequential summary of events, not the play-by-play of her conversation with the policeman. Now, if this was written in scene, we would get the actual dialogue, but here she's summarizing the conversation. It wasn't the breaks, I thought. She had her reasons. Not that they were ever the same as anybody else's reasons. She was completely ruthless in that way. Okay, and here we move into a scene where we get the actual conversation with the policeman in real time. I suppose you want someone to identify her, I said. I'll come down as soon as I can. I could hear the calmness of my own voice, as if from a distance. In reality, I could barely get the words out. My mouth was numb. My entire face was rigid with pain. I felt as if I'd been to the dentist. I was furious with Laura for what she'd done, but also with the policeman for implying that she'd done it. A hot wind was blowing around my head, the strands of my hair lifting and swirling in it like ink spilled in water. I'm afraid there will be an inquest, Mrs. Griffin, he said. Naturally, I said, but it was an accident. My sister was never a good driver. Okay, so when there's a moment of realization, in this case, that there was going to be an inquest into her sister's death, it's written in scene. It's unfolding for us in the present, moment by moment. So the summary gives us the background, the sequential series of events that led to this confrontation with the policeman. But the conversation is played out in scene. So in summary, it's already happened, but in scene, it's happening. Okay, let's recap. Point number 1, scene and summary are both ways of treating narrative time. Summary covers a relatively long period of time in a relatively short space on the page. Scene deals at length with a relatively brief span of time. Number 2, you write in scene to highlight significant moments. These could be turning points or moments of realization, a confrontation, or insights, big or small. A scene is a mini arc of change. Your character comes into the scene wanting or believing one thing and leaves the scene with a new belief or a new plan. Number 3, summary is often used to set up the scene, such as important events that happened in the past or character details that are useful for understanding the protagonist or supporting characters. You can also insert summary into a scene to share background information that gives us insight into the character. Maybe the summary shows the character reflecting on the past, or you can use summary to control the pace of the scene. And number 4, both scene and summary complement each other. A well-written summary can be just as riveting and memorable as a scene. You can use concrete, specific, and sensory details to breathe life into your summary. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.